Welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council meeting. It is February 24th, 2022. It's 6 o'clock, and Councilmember Bill Shacklett has our prayer and our pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to introduce a friend of lots of folks in this room and in our community, a special friend of mine, Gloria Bonner. And Gloria is going to tell us a little bit, educate us a little bit about February and the particular special month that this is. And she's got lots of education background, so I think she'll do a good job. So,
Thank
Gloria
you
Bonner.
so much. And I can only give credit to the outstanding teachers in Murfreesboro City Schools and Rutherford County and Middle Tennessee State University. So thank you. To our honorable mayor and the esteemed members of the city council and our really the leaders of the community in the audience. I have been on a mission for about 20 years. Particularly in the month of February, there's been this great debate about Black History Month, and perhaps many of you have heard this. Why did they give us February to celebrate Black History Month? It's the shortest month of the year, and it has nothing to do with the length of the month. And so by the time I'm done briefly, I will anoint you as the Black History Month scholars that you are, and you can help me to continue on this mission throughout our community. So as you know, every February, the United States honors the contributions and sacrifices of African Americans who have been instrumental in shaping this nation. Black History Month celebrates the rich cultural heritage, the triumphs, the struggles that are an indelible part of our country's history. Therefore, it was Dr. Carter G. Woodson, known as the father of Black history, who designated February in 1926 as a time to promote, educate, celebrate Black History Month and the culture for the following reasons. Now, here's why he selected February. There are three very prominent Americans that celebrate their birthday in the month of February. So when you were in third grade and fifth grade, you learned who they were. George Washington, February 22nd. Abraham Lincoln, 16th president. We celebrate his birthday on February 12th. And Frederick Douglass, very prominent African-American leader who fought to end slavery. He was born into slavery. We don't have the exact date of his birth, so he selected Valentine's Day as his birthday. And his home was known as the Little White House. So if you get an opportunity to visit the Little White House, it's really a fascinating monument there. Also, February was selected because of the 15th Amendment. The Right to Vote Amendment was ratified February 3rd, 1870, which was designed to protect the voting rights of African Americans, particularly after the Civil War. And then on February 4th, 1913, this little but powerful young lady was born, the mother of the Civil Rights Movement, Mrs. Rosa Parks. So when we celebrate Black History Month, it wasn't because there were only 28 days or 29 occasionally. It's because of the significance of the roles of these individuals that made significant contributions to our country. So now, are you willing to be my ambassadors to share that information to debunk the myth of it being not just the shortest month, but one of the most significant months in our country? Now, as we go into prayer, you know, a lot has changed since COVID. But not only that, just this week alone, the intensity of what's happening internationally has really caused a lot of stress and tension. So I'm going to ask that you bow with me in prayer as we pray for our national leaders, our statewide leaders, and particularly our local leaders on behalf of the freedoms and the democracy that we celebrate every day. So could you bow in prayer? Father, you are our strong tower and deliverer, and we pray against all threats from within our nation as well as outside our borders. We bind the work of the enemy who seek to bring harm to our fundamental truths and to our people living abroad. Guide, guard, and protect our leaders at all levels and the men and women in our military services and their families for the sacrifices that they are positioning to make at this time. Grant them the strength, determination, and the courage to keep us safe and protect our America. Grant our leaders the grace and courage and wisdom to make sound decisions that align with your will for this nation and beyond. In your Son's name we pray. Let us all say, amen. Thank you.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. And now that you have been duly certified as ambassadors and scholars, I am going to ask permission to leave because I am currently facilitating a Rotary board meeting at Bradley Academy. Thank you, Nate Williams, for that.
Dr. Bonner, I don't think I've ever told anyone this who's given the prayer and specifically the pledge, but we love you so much. So thank you for coming.
Amen.
Councilman Shacklet, thank you for bringing Dr. Bonner. It's always a blessing.
It's my pleasure.
All right, we have the consent agenda in front of you. You have 13 items on the consent agenda.
I've got a question on one before we vote on it. And which number is it? I think it's under the approved budget amendments. There were some, it was the downtown parking study. Well, it's asking for extra money for the downtown park study, but it's a lot. Did we? Sorry, I haven't.
That was estimated from a couple of years ago, and then when they did the bid this year, it came in quite a bit higher. And so we were asked to increase that budget so that that project could continue. And I believe we're pulling that money out of our unforeseen contingency account.
I don't know why I'm struggling to find it right now, but
It was item 3 on your consent.
that's what I'm looking at. So we misjudged it by $175,000. I mean, and have we already accepted the bid?
That I'm not sure. Did we accept the bid, Sam?
Thank you, Mr. LaLance. Sam Huddleston, Development Services. Just to add a little color to that, we asked Neil Schaefer in that study to expand their scope significantly over what we had originally estimated, to include the downtown traffic study as well as a mobility study. There was a question that had been asked of us by this body previously to look at the east-west connectivity from the MTSU area and through the downtown. So we've asked them to do a lot more scope, and that was the reason for the budget and the budget adjustment to match up with the scope we were responding to.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions?
If there aren't any, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
You have the city council minutes of the 20th, 27th of January, and the 3rd, the public comment, and the 3rd, the regular meeting of February. Any additions or deletions to the minutes? All right, seeing none, can we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
I will move to old business. We have fiscal year 22 budget amendment administration. I have one request to ask the council under approve any changes. We had our meeting on Wednesday, and we talked about salaries, we talked about inflation, we talked about steps, public safety, and I had asked Aaron and Craig specifically on inflationary. I can't make a motion, but I want to request the council to consider for this fiscal year. Aaron presented to us on our dashboard. We're above budget on sales tax. We're above budget on property tax. We're above budget on just about everything that we have anticipated. I'd like to request a 7%, which is the inflationary number right now, raise for our employees for fiscal year 2022, starting now, moving forward to get us back to level when we start discussing for our budget, that we'll be back to level as far as inflation for our employees.
This including part-time?
It'd be,
Well, with part-time, we are taking a look at part-time. We know that part-time, right now, our part-time salaries aren't in the market. So they are being adjusted, and frankly, some of them are going to have to be more than 7%. But so those will be adjusted so that we're able to bring in some of the part-time. We're going to combine into full-time positions, and because we just can't hire part-time right now. So I would say for the part-time particularly, let us continue our work on that, study that before we make the adjustments to those, because we want to be able to not only decrease some of our part-time positions, but also
it may be more,
look at what we need to hire.
than 7%.
Yeah.
This would be for all full-time unified public safety, everyone in our, which the main reason too, this allows us to be able to talk about the steps when we get to budget on the discussion that we had on where it is on that compression number, so.
And also, when we're talking about part-time, are we also including the school patrol people? Because it's my understanding when we give raises, they don't get a raise. So this year, I want to see us include the school patrol.
We'll take a look at the school patrol. They are included in our part-time salary roster.
Okay, you just don't want to I want to make sure we don't leave them out this year.
So I'm assuming you've had the benefit of kind of talking with
Aaron, yeah.
Craig, and maybe just for our benefit, maybe go through. I mean, obviously the numbers we've already seen the revenue numbers, and so we understand. I think what that is. I got to get right in my head a little bit about what a 7% number looks like. A little bit there, Alan, John. So what are we looking like? What does 7% amount to?
On an annual basis, that'll be about close to $5.5 million. For the remainder of this year, I would say closer to 1.8, just to finish out this year.
So will we start like March 1st-ish, or what?
I think it'll be mid-March.
Yeah.
Right.
And we'd show up on the first April paycheck.
Right,
Systems
to get payroll time to get that information entered in and
Yeah,
everything.
we'll need administrative time to put it in.
So, one of the things that since I've been thinking about this, and since our last meeting, was the idea of a couple of the issues that we have. It seems to me in some different departments is not necessarily we can't recruit them, but then we just have more trouble retaining than we do recruiting in some areas. And that was what I think we were kind of talking about, sort of maybe compressing that range or accelerating the first 5 like we do in the unified plan. Maybe do that in the other plan. I just would want to make sure that we've kind of kept a little bit of powder dry to be able to address that too, if we do the full 7. Because, if even though 7 is only 1.8 for the remainder of the year, it's it's 5.5. We're dedicating that 5.5 here really soon. And I agree on principle that we know the number's there, we know the revenue's there, we know we got to do it either, we don't, in June if we don't do it now, at least to some degree. So I'm in favor of it. I just want to make sure that do you feel like that still leaves us a little bit of room? Because I don't really have a great feel for what that will cost if we decide to accelerate the steps, or, you know what I'm talking about, like accelerate those first 5 or 6 steps.
Well, we haven't actually, developed any new pay plans yet to see how that's going to work out in terms of just taking where this 7% raise would go and how that would impact next year's budget with how our pay plan is currently structured with a 2.5% raise. That would be probably an additional $2 million roughly to next year's budget. Now, if y'all increase those ranges between steps, that obviously would go up. If you gave an additional COLA, that would also impact it.
And this would be a straight COLA.
This 7%, we would recommend you putting that in as a straight COLA, not a blend.
Increase all the ranges, right? All the ranges would shift.
Step 1 all the way to the top out would shift, as well as those people's pay in between.
One of the other things that's come to light as I've been calling and asking and talking to people before last week's meeting and after last week's meeting was, some of the issues that we've had where we've maybe had a different raise for the exempt employees than we did the non-exempt, and so that's created some issues where maybe some of those have caught up. So, look, I'm in favor of it. I know we have to kind of do it. I just want to kind of make sure in my head at 5 million and just sort of knowing what our revenue numbers look like. I will caution everybody to just be thoughtful of this one thing between now and budget time. I mean, I think this is something that we kind of have to do. I think we can absorb it, we can afford it, and probably need to do it, as we've all discussed. But something that does weigh on me a little bit is the cost of growth a lot of times are a lagging, they lag. It takes 2 or 3 years, we haven't had to build the new fire hall yet for the last 10 or 15,000 people that have moved here, right? But we know that will happen. If we're gonna do a new school, we know that will happen, and we know that's around the corner. So, those are costs that even though, yes, those revenues exist today, we just need to be mindful of that when, between now and budget as it relates to what we do in addition to, I think, what, we can afford to do right now. Just be a suggestion or a thought for y'all to keep in mind.
Right, and looking at the big picture, want to make sure that we're going to be fair across the board. So, and I agree with what you're saying because, with growth comes pain. Just want us to be consistent across the board with all the employees.
Well, I don't think we can afford to do any more scenarios where we, kind of separate out the exempt from the non-exempt. Like we have the last budget or two, because we're starting to press some of the non-exempt employees right up against the exempt boss, and that's probably not a scenario any of us want to try to get into. And we're just talking about salaried employees here, I mean, it's just a matter of whether one's exempt, and I'm not talking about overtime either. So
Right.
I think it's probably fairest to just go straight across the board and do everybody all at once.
Right.
It seems to me that would be the best way to do it this time around.
Well, and I want to, one comment I'd make, we went through a lot of pain over the last 4 or 5 years on decisions that the council's made, and, part of that, we put almost $20 million into our general fund last year based on conservative budgeting and conservative spending. We're now talking about a discussion that we're going to have as a council over the next many months is the reappraisals coming in on our property. That number, after meeting with Mr. Mitchell, he thinks that property appraisal values could be up as much as 40%. So those are going to be some overall discussions that we're really going to have to look moving forward, and also taking into account with the inflationary numbers we have right now. I mean, gas is around $4 a gallon right now based on, where we are, and who knows where that's going to be. We've got to be able to have the ability to catch up. And my thought was that we at least do this now. It rewards the employees who are with us, which is something that we've heard, that the people who we're focusing on the starting salaries, not the people who are currently with the city, which this helps with that. But it also sets us to square one when we start our budget, that we already know and staff knows this is what they're working with when it comes to the budget discussions, and there's not that uncertainty of where we're going to be based upon cost of living or salary increases moving forward. So I think it's a conservative number to move forward that we know after discussing that we're going to have to make a decision on.
So look, I'm in favor of it, generally speaking. My personal preference would be to know, I would love to know what that cost looks like of the compression idea. I mean, I think, when I say compression, not the old term compression, but compressing the steps, or narrowing those steps. I think it's possible that we could do that without a whole lot of cost if we reduce the steps on the back end. If we crank those steps up to, say, a 4 or 5% step on the front, but then we reduce it to a 1.5 on the back end, that we might be able to, the overall cost might not be that substantial, but I'm a little scared of it. And I really think that's a big deal. We all know that retention has been a giant challenge, and recruitment in a lot of areas, but
Recruitment, yes. Retention, I mean,
it's just always a challenge, I think, for everybody.
It's always a challenge. It is,
Yeah.
in a good market, it's always a challenge. And we've had a good economic market for quite some time.
Yeah.
It is on some of our positions that are high demand in CDL drivers.
Yeah.
That recruitment has been difficult. We've addressed those through various different ways, and I think we've settled down, but I don't think our numbers on retention are much different than a lot of other places.
No, I agree with that.
So, recruitment, we want to make sure we're in the market. That's why we went out and did our market study. I think if we do the proposed increase here, I think we're going to be very attractive in the market, and I think we'll stay there for quite some time. I think that because we're doing a COLA, obviously the numbers are shifting. So if you have an arbitrary goal to be to midpoint and you do a COLA, you're always moving out that arbitrary goal. That's not really a good way to look at compensation for any individual person or any individual job. It's, what job are they doing? Where do they fit in the salary? What did they take? How long they've been here? What did they take when they came in? Those types of things are factors, and not an arbitrary number like a midpoint. Generally speaking, now there are some differences when you talk about public safety, and we have to be cautious of that, and we are. We think that, quite frankly, our pay plan has been very successful, and we think that we're pretty close. I think our market survey showed that we're pretty close in the market, except for some things we've learned, and we're adjusting. This will get us a long way. I'm not sure we need to make a whole lot of adjustments to our pay plan. If you front load your pay plan, you're going to be back in a few years backloading it and fixing that. It's just going to be the nature of the market, because if you're going to be everybody that gets past that front loaded section and gets into the backload, they're going to say that's not enough. It's just the way it's going to work.
I could see it being similar to where you were talking about the exempt and open range getting a smaller raise and causing friction and compression there. If we adjusted that step plan to be a similar structure, I could see that having that same sort of unintended impact down the road as well. So we'd want to be very thoughtful about how to structure a step plan if all the steps weren't equal all the way across.
But
Yeah, that would create a lot of problems. I think one of the issues that you identified there, we've talked about, and I think there's a way to address it. I mean, it's not so much the exempt employees, non-exempt employees, except that's where we make the break for the step plan. So it's really the step plan, and we can, and there's only a crossover for like 3 or 4 positions, or I'm sorry, 3 or 4 classifications. So if we take the 3 or 4 classifications, where there's a crossover between exempt and non-exempt, and just put them all in the step plan, we've resolved that issue going forward. There's only 2 years where that would really happen, where we gave step higher than we gave the open range. So it's not a common thing. It just
Well,
happened the next two.
I guess my point is to say, it doesn't need to be a common thing, or else we do create problems.
well,
right? I mean, you
right.
know,
We-
and that's, I mean, we're already, it's, you know, from the example that we got the email about, you know, I mean, it's already put us in a situation where we're gonna have some non-exempt employees that are gonna start kind of overcoming, depending on the day they got hired and they were in when the accelerated, because,
Well-
I mean, we already kind of have accelerated steps in the unified plan. You know, your first 6 steps are, then you go into open range, right?
They're not accelerated. They're assured, somewhat assured. We always left it open, the council could change that. So the idea was that the first 5 years before they get to step 6 is an assured increase with.
I gotcha.
You see that, but it
But
wasn't,
not necessarily accelerated?
unless, when council has done it, I don't think we've ever recommended it, and we've discussed it, we'd be perfectly happy with across the board being the same so that you didn't run into that solution or that situation. But one of the solutions that we've come up with is to take the overlap positions, and again, there's very few, I think there's 3 or 4 classifications, and just put them in a step. They can be in the step, even though they're exempt positions. We just made the break there, but we don't have to make the break there. And that would have that situation, so if council came in and they wanted to do the steps with an additional, then we wouldn't have the overlapping positions, and you'd rarely run into a situation. And there's always gonna be some situation with someone in any pay plan that's gonna find fault in it somehow with respect to their unique situation. I've never seen it in 20 years of government service and private sector that
Yeah,
something.
I get that too. I mean,
It's gonna be there, and one person's gonna complain, and we can't just react to that in every situation.
Look, I don't want to commandeer this. I'm just kind of trying to think through the idea
Yeah.
of what I know, or what, you know, on some of the same angle as what you're talking about. We can chase this kind of starting salary thing forever and ever and ever too. And, you know, the idea of we're going to train them and then they're going to turn around and leave. If our starting salary is better than the next organization, but the other organization has that accelerated movement that they overtake us 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, we still haven't corrected the issue of we keep them here for a year or two and they jump ship on us. You know, they move organizations. And so that's the retention part that I'm kind of specifically trying to address.
Yeah.
And somehow, I just want to make sure we have at least left some resources to
do
try
that.
to address it if we can find a way
Right.
that makes sense within the pay plan. And by the way, I agree that the pay plan has been really, I believe it's been very good. Now, that doesn't change whether or not somebody thinks they are getting the right amount of pay, but the plan itself, I believe, has worked, and the process has worked to be able to go in and do the pay study, you know, do the first thing. I mean, I'm more confident in that than ever after having gone through this the last few weeks.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that doesn't
couple.
change inflation, right? That-
Yeah.
Well, and I think overall, the one thing we can't, you know, if we raise, there's no other municipality that's doing this that I've seen.
I haven't either.
But, you know, when we raise, someone else is going to raise, so we're always going to be chasing that tail. But I think what we heard on Wednesday, and it really hit me, that we spend so much time focusing on starting pay that we don't focus on the person who's been here 4, 5, 8 years to be able to get to that. You know, you can't spend midpoint, but at least what that number is. So with doing this is going to move everyone equally, unified, non-unified, public safety, everyone. And then it puts us to where when we do want to have that discussion at the budget time, that if we want to see where this puts us overall in that discussion, then we're there. But I really think after this is put into place, there's going to be very few municipalities that we're going to have that disadvantage of losing people, because we're bringing everyone up, all those ranges up at the same time.
Yeah, From a starting salary standpoint, providing experience credit is helpful, because your starting salary is really what you would hire someone at the minimum qualifications, and if we have a greater need and we can compensate for that, that's a benefit. So, and once you do that, you get them closer to midpoint and less likely they're going to leave. But as we get to be a larger city, we are going to see people that come and they want to come here for a few years, and either they get to the 5-year point, and there's a reason why people would work to 5 years and then leave, or shorter, is sometimes they will come into a larger city and then they want to go back to where they came from, where their family is, where they have maybe land. And so that was always their plan all along. So we're always going to see that, and the larger we get and the more training we do, we're going to see some of that. We can address some of that in different ways. It's not always a pay issue, though. I mean, people will leave and go and work in a smaller place because they grew up there and that's where their family is, and they'll take less money. But we spent time training them, and so it's gonna happen.
Our question is, I think you got to slay these dragons one at a time, and this issue is pretty complex, so I think this is going to address one part of what we discussed at our workshop. But I guess the technical problem is this the way we do this? Can we just make a motion to across the board, or this wasn't on the agenda, and can we do that? Is that,
Y'all can amend the budget. We have a budget amendment for second reading here. So if you choose to make this motion and approve it, we can go ahead and add that into this budget amendment to go into effect in mid-March.
Bill, we had the discussion last week with the budget amendment. So the reason I didn't bring this up under other business is because we were already talking about a budget amendment. So this would just be amending the budget.
I got you.
To go ahead, and it was a good opportunity because that was already there.
And so that's the procedural part of it. But I want to be clear that if we do this mid-March, it won't show up. We have to have time to put it into the system, and this isn't for you guys as much as it is for people that might be listening, otherwise you have staff. If we put it in mid-March, it's not until 1st of April, because we run on a 2-year deferred payment system that they're going to see that.
2 week. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 2 week. What'd I say?
Yeah.
2 year. Yeah. I like 2 years.
So budget time.
2 year. That would.
So anything that
planning.
and that's really the issue with the budget, is anything we discuss in May or June, it takes your team 3 to 4 weeks to be able to prepare the next year. In this case, because doing a COLA, it's a whole lot easier to do that as opposed to messing with all the ranges and all of those things. So this is a much easier ability to do that. If we did this in July, there's a much harder process to be able to get that, for them to be able to do that.
So the figures as far as salaries that we'll be dealing with when we get to budget are going to actually include this significant COLA.
Correct.
And if that's the motion, I mean, I will make that motion.
Have a motion?
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion?
There is a one change to your Exhibit
Okay.
B on the second reading, where finance is adding or requesting to add an account.
Hold on one second, because this is going to be an amendment. Bill's motion is an amendment to the budget, so we need to vote on the amendment to add this, and then we'll get your other amendment as well.
Is that then?
I just didn't know if you could do them both at the same time.
Don't think let's just do it.
That's absolutely
I
fine.
have another question about the budget amendment also.
Let's vote on this. This motion is for a 7% COLA increase to all employees full-time that we have at the city, knowing, Madeline, that they're working on the part-time, which could be more than that. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now vote on, for second and final reading, Ordinance 22-001.
So for that, we needed to do the amendment to add the position as well.
Okay.
since you wanted to do that separate from the 7%.
Okay, can we have a motion to add the position as requested? Do you have a question?
What position are we talking about?
It's an accountant
The accounting.
position, but there's no fiscal impact because they have budgeted
That's a separate thing
savings.
that's
Yes.
being added.
We need
It's
to,
a
we need to
second-
add,
It's a second amendment.
So moved or second, whichever
motion
one.
second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
We got two of us.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
I will now consider for second and final reading ordinance 22001 as amended. Councilman Lance.
Yeah, so on this amendment, and you'll have to just forgive me, I didn't dig in to see this, but, when we were talking about this Wednesday at first reading, we talked through some of this, and then we kind of said, well, you guys have this bucket and to deal with some of the changes that were sort of listed out. I don't think that listed out any of the, from, as a result of the market study on the jobs.
Oh, yeah.
That was somewhere that we said, yeah, just kind of go ahead and do those ones that already need to be done.
Right.
Was kind of the way that I thought that. The one question that I had on that, did that include anybody shifting from 37.5 to 40-hour work week, or is that going to be
It-
something we deal with?
No, it included that, but the cost of shifting that can be accommodated through budgeted salaries already. So there wasn't enough money in there to make it a part of this budget amendment. It would be, if we need to do it, it would come back under the minor amendments that we bring periodically
Most
that you
likely,
just
we could
voted
cover
on.
that under our unforeseen contingency if
Yeah.
something came up where we needed to down the road. I'm certain there'll be another budget amendment ordinance coming to y'all where we could introduce that then. But right now, we think that we've got the budgeted savings to cover those adjustments.
Yeah, so those are minor.
One thing I'll bring up with that, just to, for the what it's worth, and I've gotten a little bit lost in the, in the procedural piece of this to understand. So let me just say this to you. I mean, some positions, I think it makes all the sense in the world to go from 37.5 to 40. Some, there may be some consequences of that I need to make sure I understand, especially it seems in my world of exempt employees. And, how that moving to 40-hour work week for an exempt employee might impact their particular situation.
Right.
I don't want to vote on something that says, yes, it's okay to do that without me understanding it. Is that anywhere in here?
No, that's not part of this. And
All right.
we're aware of some of those consequences. We're going to
Okay.
be careful of it, but nothing that we discussed in the market survey was
Okay.
part of that.
All right.
And I will say that with the adjustment we're making here, some of what we discussed we'll go back and look, and it may take care of some of what we were going to do anyway, from the market
I
study
see.
adjustment, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's
there was no
very
exempt-
complicated, but I've got at least my head around a little bit of it to think, I think there are some issues that we need to make sure that are resolved so
Right.
that I can be comfortable with it. And
Yeah,
I just
we're
want to make sure
being-
we didn't do that in this.
Yeah, we're being
Okay.
pretty careful with that, yeah.
All right,
I'll move for approval for item number 15 with the adjustments that we've made, the amendments that we've made tonight.
motion.
Second.
Bill, second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
We've just been discussing, since I've been out, we haven't changed anything, right? Okay.
No, ma'am.
No, nothing changed.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to land use matters. You have ordinance 21OZ41 zoning for property along Florence Road. This is second and final reading.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. This is ordinance 21OZ42 zoning for property along New Salem Highway, and this is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Item 18, ordinance 21OZ46, amending the Arbors PRD zoning along Compton Road, and this is second and final reading.
Do we need you? Or is there something?
I was just here in case anybody needed to. Last meeting, you recall, we asked for the 2 connector streets to not connect into this subdivision. The program book that has been provided reflects that, as well as there is one exception that they are asking for, is an exception to our subdivision regs for that connection. So they'll leave the streets as they are in the county with no cul-de-sacing or changing of it to meet county standards. It would stay as is, and then there would be no connection into the subdivision. So we have a map if you need it.
Bueller.
So moved.
One.
It looked like they were studying.
Yeah. No, that's good.
You good? All right, second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
No.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Are you going to do the city schools budget amendment number 5?
Sorry, I jumped.
Sam, you're welcome to do that. All right, we have Resolution 22R01, fiscal year 22, city schools budget amendment. Mr. Duke thought that Mr. Huddleston was the new director of schools there for a
Well,
second.
I'm happy to pass that duty on tonight if you'd like to have that now. We were awarded 1 new federal grant along with increases to 2 existing federal grant, and this budget amendment recognizes those new revenues and the expenditures to go along with those in the allowable line items. They are for early literacy network grants, some literacy training, and an increase to our American Rescue Plan homeless grant.
No questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we have planning commission recommendations.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I stand before you tonight regarding matters previously heard by the Planning Commission for public hearings before Council. During its regular meetings on February the 2nd, 2022, the Planning Commission conducted public hearings and then voted to recommend their approval on the annexation petition and plan of services for approximately 258.8 acres located along Northwest Broad, Horde family the applicant, and a zoning application for approximately 258.8 acres located along Northwest Broad Street to be zoned CH and GDO simultaneously with the annexation. SEC on the behalf of Legacy Sports Tennessee as the applicant. And we ask that these public hearings be scheduled for April 7th. I'm available for any questions.
No questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Road Development Agreement, Cherry Lane, STI 8. Mr. Huddleston.
Trey Duke, Director of Schools here in my stead. Sorry about that mix-up there. I was ready to go on this item. So before tonight, we have a road development agreement for Cherry Lane, a portion of Cherry Lane extension, which we're referring to as Short-Term Improvement 8, Phase 1. That's on our 2040 Major Transportation Plan through the Mason Brook subdivision. Tonight, you approved earlier on second reading the zoning entitlement for that project. And with that zoning entitlement and proposed project, staff and the developer have worked on a road development agreement that would construct a portion of Short-Term Improvement 8. This extension of Cherry Lane, as it's drawn on the Major Transportation Plan, would extend from Broad Street to Florence Road. It would pass through the property that was proposed for Mason Brook development. And in working with the developer and staff on that, we have proposed a joint public-private partnership that would require the Alcorn Properties to construct a portion of a 5-lane roadway along the commercial section of that property, and then for the remaining residential section, a 2-lane roadway with a sidewalk on one side and a multi-use path on the other side in the residential portion. The right-of-way for that, it requires about 100 feet, and so the city's commitment on this would be to purchase at the same price that Alcorn Properties is purchasing the real estate, the actual right-of-way we need. That number will be determined when the city engineer finalizes the construction plans, and then the city would also provide for the design and surveying of this roadway, as well as a preliminary engineering study for the extension of this roadway to Old Nashville Highway to make sure that we can physically construct the road the way we think we can. The joint funding on this property would break down this way. It's our staff's estimate that the private participation in this project would be about $1.4 million for the 1,700 feet, and the city's future obligations will be about $1.3 million. Those future obligations we anticipate would come from the FY21 bond proceeds reallocation. And what we're asking for you to do tonight is to approve the agreement with Alcorn Properties and 2 expenditures that will be required very shortly with that. One of those would be the actual purchase of the right-of-way, and we'll have deeds for that, and that'll come back to you to execute, as well as the city engineer will have an item after this for the actual design and surveying. That physical obligation just with the agreement tonight would be $360,000 approximately, and that would come from the FY21 bond proceeds reallocation. With the road development agreement, as this project was presented to our planning commission, the agreement includes restrictions on the type and style of housing, minimum square footages, and minimum quality of construction. Those are in the agreement that as it was shared with you, and then also there are limitations on the uses of the commercial properties that over and above those that are they're entitled to for the zoning. I'd be glad to answer any questions on this, and we ask for your approval and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement on behalf of the city.
Any questions for Mr. Huddleston?
There's no questions. I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, you have the professional services agreement for Cherry Lane ST1 or STI-8 Phase 1. Ms. Emerson.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. As Mr. Holston said, I'm bringing before you the professional agreement, or the design contract for Civil Infrastructure Associates LLC in the amount of $110,084 to do the design of this Cherry Lane Extension short-term improvement number 8. The funding for this will be from the reallocation of the 2021 bond proceeds.
There are no questions. I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Abstain.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you. All right, we have approval to purchase turnout gear. Chief Oaks.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is for a modification to an existing contract that we had, an amendment to that contract for MES, which is our equipment provider, our vendor. They had to change manufacturers of the turnout gear due to the current manufacturer that we previously had the contract with not being able to provide the items that we requested or the items that we bid. In fact, they reduced entire lines of the product that we were looking to buy, and we were no longer able to purchase those, and there were many supply chain issues with those and that manufacturer. It's been a nationwide problem for that particular manufacturer, and many fire departments across the United States have kind of gone away from them due to that fact. But this is going to Firedex as a manufacturer, and it would, this expense is $123,095, and it is funded in our budget. I would recommend passage of this amendment so that we can purchase the gear through MES with Firedex.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Chief, I don't think the council knows, but there's a group here in town. Chief invited me to come out and give them the welcome on Tuesday, but we have a group that all 50 states, there's a fire department here from all 50 states in 4 different countries that are at the embassy suites this week. So working on community corrective actions, I believe is the way you put it. So thank you, Chief. All right, we have managed security service. This is with IT. Matt.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. IT is requesting funding for a new cybersecurity service. This service will provide 24-hour monitoring of network traffic throughout the city and will notify and assist IT in mitigation and restoration of city services in the event of a cyber attack. This service will also provide guidance for attack prevention, and this will help ensure that the city remains up to date with current best practice standards in cybersecurity.
Any questions for Mr. Jarrett?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you, Matt. All right, we have an agreement for police department gun vaults for vehicles. Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. For your consideration this evening is a request to approve a purchase agreement with Truckers Lighthouse for 30 new security vaults to be installed in recently purchased Ford Explorers. Total cost of $39,270 will be funded from the FY21 CIP. This time I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
There are none. I'll move for approval. Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, item 27, the purchase of data storage equipment. Mr. Terry.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight we're asking for approval to add some additional storage to our video storage system. We've reached approximately 75% capacity on this device, and while we are rapidly going toward body cams and some cloud storage, we still have a need to fulfill right now, so we would ask for your approval to add additional storage to our system. This is being funded out of CIP and some of our operation budget.
We're on item 26, 27? Item 27, I'll move for approval. Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We have the purchase of 2 Chevy cargo vans, schools.
Good evening again. We are requesting the approval of a contract with Wilson County Motors for the purchase of 2 new Chevy Express cargo vans for our maintenance department. Wilson County Motors quoted the price of $27,500 for a total price of $55,000 from the state Tennessee contract. This expenditure will be paid from the county share bonds previously approved by council during the CIP meetings.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we have to replace cooling towers at Northfield Elementary School.
Yes, we are recommending the approval to award the contract with Matrix Mechanical Solutions to replace the cooling tower of at Northfield Elementary. Matrix Mechanical submitted the lowest bid to meet project specifications at $97,693. The expenditures will be paid from the county shared bonds previously approved by City Council during the CIP meetings.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Just to keep him on his toes, I skipped item 25, construction contract for Mcfadden outdoor basketball court. Thank y'all for reminding me it was not
okay.
intentional.
Understand, it's fine. Hey, good evening, Mayor, members of council. Before you is a contract with Stubblefield Construction to build a concrete pad and install 2 commercial basketball goals for a new outdoor court at Mcfadden Community Center, totaling $71,960. As publicly bid, Stubblefield Construction submitted the lowest quote. This is the first phase of the project. The second phase will include lighting, fencing, court surfacing, and estimated at $40,436. In 2021, we received a $40,000 grant for this project. So with that grant, the total investment for the city is $71,396. We have $100,000 allocated in the 2019 CIP for Mcfadden improvements. This will be a much-needed amenity to this facility and for the surrounding community. And I would be glad to answer any questions you have.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Nate. Sorry I missed you. All right, you have a couple of beer permits.
We have 2 new locations for gas stations at 1646 Joe B. Jackson Parkway and 1942 Broad Street. Both applicants have met requirements for a beer permit, and staff recommends approval pending final building and codes inspections.
Beer. Champies?
Champions? I ain't there ever keep them.
I move for approval. Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. You have 2 recommendations to the Airport Commission, Ken Lowry and Shelby Hutton.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye, and for the record, Lowry was misspelled, so it's Loughry. Thought I'd point that out for you, Craig, since the applicant pointed that out to me today. Any statements to be paid?
No.
Okay, any other business from staff? Any other business from council?
Got a couple of reminders. They have already had one of these, but it was a showcase movie at Patterson Park. The Legacy, let me look it up here. Okay. They're called Tennessee Legacy Film Discussion. And they had one, and this is actually sponsored by Ron Washington's Family Foundation. And there's another one this coming Saturday. It's from 12 to 3 in the Washington Theater at Patterson Park. I'd encourage you to go. The last time it was a real interesting discussion and well attended too. So there's another one happening this coming Saturday, 12 to 3. And then I want to remind you of the joint meeting of the Murfreesboro City Schools and the Rutherford County Schools Joint Legislative Forum on March the 3rd from 5:30 to 7:30, and that will be held at the Gilbert room at the Murfreesboro City Schools administrative offices, and you're encouraged to come if you can.
Hey, Councilman LaLance just pointed out.
I'm not sure.
I think we misspelled Shelby. It's not Hutton, it's Hunton. So it's Hunton for the record. So both of our applicants to the Airport Commission were misspelled, so.
Their handwriting was clearly on the application.
Yeah, it could have been. Hey, one.
They're different guys.
Just for,
Let's blame the handwriting.
We'll blame the. Hey, this Saturday, MTSU is playing right now. I haven't been able to see what the score is, but the men's team hit 20 wins on Monday night. And so on Saturday, we play the team that we all love to hate. We're playing Western Kentucky. We're leading the conference right now, so we filmed a video on Tuesday to encourage people to come out, but please come out and watch this team. If you've not been able to watch them play, they are really fun to watch. So come pack the Murphy Center on Saturday and support our Blue Raider team.
And do we need to,
Time on Saturday, Mayor?
What's that?
On Saturday?
I think it's 6, but you need to go to www.goblueraiders.com and you'll be able to find out. I would tell everyone, if you're going to go, you need to buy tickets, because I had an email today that they're expecting a sellout crowd. So it'd be good to go ahead and get tickets now.
first time in a while.
You what, Madeline?
I was just wondering if we needed to amend the budget to get Mr. Tyndall some glasses.
Man, that hurts, doesn't it?
I didn't sign that letter.
Yeah.
Whose letter is that?
All right, that's a good one. With that, we'll stand adjourned.
I'll take the money.
That's a good one, Madeline.